for men, there's also going to be males for women.
Well,
And
if you look at it
so
right
inclined
now,
males.
the sex toy industry makes its bread and butter off of toys for women. How many toys do you have for guys?
Well, it's
if
a
you
short
have-
range, but it's a limited.
It's very limited. All you need is a hole.
Right.
I don't care how much you dress up that hole. It's a hole.
A tree trunk for me in the backyard.
Winnie the Pooh sex doll.
Complete with
However,
bees.
when you get into the ladies' variety, they have this one that's smooth, this one that's bumpy, this one that's this long, it's this wide, it's this color.
Right, one hole or two. I mean,
Actually, they do have those options. Actually, they
I
have
know.
to the point where it gives you stimulation, both holes plus the clitoris. Plus
I know that's what I bought
something
my
else.
ex-girlfriend a couple of her birthdays ago.
Did you tell her to go F herself when you gave it to her?
No, this is because
See,
there's only so many times. Like Ed, as we know, guys, there's only so many times we can get it up. And if you have a girlfriend who's an info,
you're talking. You're
she's either
talking to a
going
person.
she's either going elsewhere, or I'm buying her one of these things.
I could have an
I'm
eye
worried- I'm
hanging
worried-
out of my skull. My eyeball would be dangling completely free, except for the nerve attached, and I can still do it. Yeah, I mean, it's a special breed of person that can do it. I understand that.
Listen,
I
I
had food poisoning and pneumonia, and I was still able to perform.
Can we get to the Rock already?
Yes,
This poor man over here.
yes.
Seth is turning redder
well-
by the second.
Well, first of all, Ed, you stole his microphone.
I'm so, well.
First of all,
Beat him up, Seth. Take it back.
He doesn't want to join in on this.
No.
Too busy throwing up.
okay. So, so basically, right. So Ed's just preventing that microphone from going to waste.
Exactly.
Fine.
So I got one question for this sex toy thing, and then I'm
We're going to the music.
No, no, I know, but I gotta ask this. Any other time a woman finds a bumpy penis, it is no good and she runs, but she buys a toy that simulates a bumpy dildo.
That's because when
What?
that's because usually when a penis
Because
is
it's ripped
bumped,
for her pleasure.
So aren't my herpes, but she runs from them.
Well, there's a difference.
Yes,
When it's the herpes are made out of latex, they're not going to transmit anything unless it's left over from the last time
I
she
could put
used
some
it.
latex over them.
Charlie Sheen version.
Charlie Sheen sex toy.
By the way, I will take the hate mail because that came off of my microphone, but that was Seth. If it's the Charlie Sheen version, it's questionable what the outcome may be.
I'll tell you, I'm not impressed by Charlie Sheen anymore because he only gets AIDS after it's safe.
I know.
I mean, what,
Now that should be a T-shirt. Coming soon from George Garner Clothing.
now on that note, as promised, as requested by Chuckles, as promised by me, and we are going to get to some music talk here with Seth, who is right now he's composing himself. Ed has given him back his microphone
Address all hate mail to George Garner,
as
care of
usual.
Rhode Island Free Radio.
As usual. But now, Seth, okay, now we're switching to music. Now, one thing we're not going to do, since Tony is nice enough to produce this special edition on, of our radio programs, I guess it's a United radio program tonight, we're not going to discuss KISS.
That's fine. That's okay.
I guess, out of respect for our producer,
I hate Kiss.
well, nobody cares about respect for you.
Oh, you better.
I'm just more concerned about the man behind the controls that might get up and walk out if we talk about KISS. So
And after this last broadcasting segment, I'm going to have a lot of editing to do behind this console.
Hey, listen, I didn't hear one word in that whole segment that was FCC negative. Actually, I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's all scientifically correct.
We talked about that subject without, yeah.
And that's why they must teach sex ed, so we can be educated.
There you go.
Yeah.
We found out the real purpose for it, so we can talk trash on the radio indefinitely
And
without
be legal.
without running afoul of the SEC. Okay, but now, Seth, musically speaking, I don't know, I'll just ask a general question to lead us into it because I don't know where this is going to go. Like,
Okay,
all right,
I'm open.
All right, lately, all right, musically, what's impressing you? Like, where do you want to go with this conversation before one of us takes over it again?
Well, I mean, there's a new band called Inglorious that it sounds really good, 60-ish, maybe Doors, Stones. I mean, I see a lot of bands like that, Rival Sons, that kind of going back to the 60s, 70s rooted rock, as opposed to a lot of stuff that's out there.
Like really retro?
Very retro, yes.
I don't know. I'm not sure if that's a good thing. I mean, I'm sick and tired of classic rock. I mean, does this mean I just have to listen to it again?
You have to define classic rock because there's bands still putting out records that are defined as classic rock, and I don't understand why they do that.
Well, it's past the age, isn't it? Like after a certain age, it's considered classic, just like a car.
Well, yeah, the song. Classic rock is right. It's an age thing, right? I mean, not so much. I mean, say Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath
Past
is still
20
around
years.
now. You know, if Black Sabbath releases an album now, it's not classic rock. I mean, the album they released 30 years ago is classic rock, right?
Agreed, but they still take 13, for instance, and still call it classic rock on classic rock station.
Well, not on this show because that's wrong.
It is wrong. That's
Right.
what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. The other thing I'm starting to see that I'm not a big fan of is all these bands making cover albums.
I agree with that 100%. One of my favorite bands, Disturbed, and I really wish they would get away from doing the cover songs. They are so much better by themselves. They don't need to be doing this cover crap.
Now they released. It's an album of just cover songs.
No, probably about every one of their albums has 2 or 3 cover songs on it, and it's unnecessary.
Well, everybody looks at Alien Ant Farm, whose whole career was defined by a Michael Jackson cover.
Yeah, and playing on top of BET television and getting arrested after doing it.
Well, you were speaking of Alice Cooper earlier. He did that Hollywood Deads with Johnny Depp playing, little
That's
Pirates
a
of the Caribbean.
yes.
Joe Perry. But a lot of that. I'm just not a big fan of a group that comes out and does a whole covers album. To me, it's almost
Right,
lazy.
not putting a couple of covers on an album, but a whole covers. Actually, that's not really lazy. That to me means at a loss for good ideas.
I don't think so. I disagree with that. Hollywood Undead was originally formed under that. It was to pay tribute to the rock and rollers that had passed, that had made a big influence on the rockers that are now. So it's not so much as they're sitting back making money off of, which they are making money off these reboots, but it's so much paying homage to some of these rockers that have passed
It's
away.
a different category. I'm saying, you had Metallica did it.
Yeah, I think what Chuckles is saying, right? That's a slightly different story. I mean, that's like Seth said. Well, it goes back to John Lennon, back when after from in history when the Beatles broke up. Paul McCartney is a prolific songwriter. John Lennon not so much, and John Lennon just made one commercial. He made some good music, but it was commercially unsuccessful, and he didn't know what to do next. I guess if Yoko Ono is nagging you in one of your ears, it's hard to come up
creative.
Be creative, absolutely.
Right, because
Just want to look at it would sap my creativity. But so what John Lennon did is he made that album called Rock and Roll, which was basically just going back and recording a bunch of Little Richard tunes and rock and roll from the 50s, and pretty much that ever since that set the example. Whenever Joan Jett did it,
Elvis did it.
Whenever
Elvis just put his name on it.
but I'm thinking Joan Jett, even the Ramones did it, and you can see it coming almost. Like I said, the Alice Cooper one, that's a little different. That was a
Right.
method.
Guns N' Roses is huge on doing cover songs. Some of their biggest songs are cover songs.
Right, but you can see it coming. When a band has released maybe like 3 or 4 albums of crap in a row, and the ideas are becoming less and less, and the good songs are becoming less and less, you can almost time it. Okay, the next one is going to be their tribute to their cover tribute.
That or a live album, one or the other.
Yeah, well, they've already done the bands in question. Most of them have already done the live album.
Oh yeah, Cooper's done like 6 live albums.
Once you've done the live album, then the only thing you can do is to go to that cover album and call it a tribute. That's
I don't mind doing this. I mean, if you look at songs that made bands, You Really Got Me for Van Halen, I'm almost synonymous more so with them than with the Kinks. If you look at bands having a couple of hits, Quiet Riot doing "Come On, Feel the Noise," which was in the studio was the worst version of doing the song, trying not to record it, and ends up being their biggest hit.
Well, that's 2 different things. Even that's 2 different than looking back at the classic rock bands. I mean, Van Halen was a good band whether or not they did covers. They just happened to they liked doing covers. They put a couple on each album.
Well,
but their non-covers, their original music was pretty good too.
Agreed, but back then, the other thing too, even when you look at the '60s, the record label insisted on a cover so that you get popular by doing a song that's already known to the public. Not many bands came out and just did their own version.
Part of the reason was that putting on the music historian cap, back in the I was going to say 50s and 60s, but you go back even before rock and roll to the big bands and the show tunes and everything like that. In the 50s and 60s in rock and roll, there was no such thing as singer-songwriters. In other words, there was two distinct
they wrote
music camps, I
Motown's
guess.
big for that.
Right, and not only was it pretty unknown for an artist to write their own songs, but they were discouraged from it, and in some cases they weren't allowed to, because there were songwriters unions that if you wanted a song, you went to this, you went to the songwriter, Tin Pan Alley, one of the famous ones. You went to the songwriters and got a song. That's why you'll see back in the 50s especially, then it was still in the 60s but not as much. In the 1950s, you'll see like 5 different versions of the same song by 5 different people. It's not like, Elvis, Wanda Jackson, Little Richard all said, hey, this is such a great song, we all have to do it. It was, okay, here's the pool of songs we have to draw
Don't forget, too, though, in the 50s, the black artists wrote their songs or had hits with them in their market, but the white people had to have them, so they made them re-record those songs so they could get it on the radio. So there was that whole battle, with the royalties and whatnot to get the song on.
It wasn't a battle though, because the black songwriters and performers didn't have a chance.
Right, but I'm saying, but they made it popular by the white people that were, Pat Boone being one of the big ones at the time that did all those songs that,
Yeah, even the legitimately famous, popular white performers like Elvis. I mean, it was the same thing, and because the black songwriter, like you said, was that completely widespread? Like black artists couldn't get on any commercial radio,
there were some that did get it, but it was very limited. But the white people was the one who put it on the map. I mean, then you had bands like Led Zeppelin that came in, took those songs, put their name on it, and gave them some royalty, and called it Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, I don't know if Led Zeppelin gave too many royalties.
No, didn't they rip off some band in Philadelphia with one? And there's a big thing going on that right now.
Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah, and they're still playing over the lawsuit to see who.
Well, I wasn't thinking of Stairway to Heaven. I was thinking of the blues, the old black blues man.
They did a lot of Willie Dixon stuff.
Was it Willie Dixon? Whole lot of love.
Well, look at the Blues Brothers selling out stadiums over a Saturday Night Live skit of actual songs where the people who wrote and performed the songs got absolutely no respect.
Well, the only thing I can say about that is that one of the songs that they did without paying royalties and gave no respect to was Robert Johnson. And we know that when the Blues Brothers, Belushi's already dead, and when Dan Aykroyd joins them, they are going to be performing their Blues Brothers act in a very unpopular, unpleasant hell. Because we all know that Robert Johnson is in good down there. So he's just waiting. So the Blues Brothers will get what they have coming to them.
That was a good point. Yeah, they made it on a whole career out of doing covers off a skit.
Yeah, but the Led Zeppelin thing, that was just an out blatant ripoff.
It was,
but it was a different kind.
People don't want to admit to that. They fear they're going to get their heads taken off because it's Led Zeppelin.
Well, that's too damn bad, because the Rolling Stones recorded plenty of black blues, and they gave full credit. Yeah, the Rolling Stones went out of their way, to popularize the bluesmen.
What's scary about that is that whole British invasion. It took the British invasion to show America how great their music was, because they didn't give a shit about it.
Well, at that point.
Yeah, and the British invasion comes in, everybody's, oh, wow, that's a great song. Wow, that was your... I mean, they didn't appreciate it the way...
Well, you're talking about the Beatles mainly, right?
Beatles and the Stones.
Right, redoing the Chuck Berry, redoing the Little Richard.
Stones, they were big on that. That early British invasion movement.
Yeah. No, the British invasion definitely re-energized, the American rock scene, no question about it. But actually innovated, too. I mean, the Kinks... Actually, where would we be without the Kinks? The Kinks were the first band to use distortion on an album.
You really got me going back to that. That's where it came from.
Yeah. So, and Van Halen added more distortion a few years later. But, the Kinks were the first band to record with distortion. John Lennon was the first, at least according to him, was the first person to use feedback on an album. I don't know how true that is, but...
He's trying to drown out Yoko Ono.
Yeah, I don't want to hear her.
Supposedly, I don't know if you can prove it. The Monkees took the synthesizer to new heights before anybody else did.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, what they used to do with Yoko Ono was that when Lennon was on tour by himself after the Beatles with Yoko Ono, they just shut off her instrument.
I guess they pulled that on the Dick Cavett show when they got ready for their sound check. They did it with their instruments plugged in, and then once they actually went to do it on the Dick Cavett show, they had